which I appreciate, is probably very patronizing, but that's one of the things that I've learned. And if people have done work with me before, you'll know that I'm a real stickler for that now, because what I've learned is if you don't do it, it always comes back to bite you on the arse, like without question. So, I've been in situations where I've thought, no, we don't need to do this. We're all adults. We can all, because I get a little bit embarrassed. That's probably the truth of it. I kind of think, do we need to really think about? And years ago, I used to support a group of people with an intellectual disability in a self-advocacy context. And we used to talk about ground rules, and they used to come up with things like no kicking, no hitting, no spitting, no headbutting. And I used to kill myself laughing and think it was really hilarious. So from then, when I've sat with groups and asked them about ground rules, I've always got a bit embarrassed. But honestly, without question, if you haven't got them, I have learned that a couple of sessions down the line, somebody will come to me and say, Kate, I will need to tell you that so-and-so was talking to somebody else outside of the group about what I said. And it becomes much, much harder to facilitate that than having something to go back to. So I've definitely got a bit more courage with that because of the mistakes of not doing it. So yeah, I just thought I'd just throw that in.
Well, thanks, Kate. Christy had one more thing before we move on.
So team, I've popped up there about what Christine mentioned before about raising hand and muting microphones as well. So that will be in there. And Kate, I've also just put like a little note to say a social contract equals ground rules, because we've worked with you as well, and we've implemented that now in our training, and it's really important. So probably for my learning, to just have that a little in brackets, ground rules, is probably going to be helpful for me to be more confident about this sort of thing.
Cool.
Thanks.
Okay, so we've got our social contract. So that's definitely one of our actions from this session to the next one. If you could facilitate, so I'm hoping that you got permission from a team, but we'll get to that. Hoping that you got permission from a team to work with them intentionally. So one of the first things that we're asking you to do is to develop a social contract with the team. And to notice that stuff about, so Shanti, it was really helpful when you were saying, actually, I need to be really confident about what I'm saying before I say it. Or Christy, I need to process this, that actually when you're facilitating that with a group, there's a temptation to say you haven't spoken yet, you speak, or because you're really aware of the whole. But I think that was really helpful to just bear in mind that actually people do it differently, and some people prefer to see a list of a stab of things and then almost kind of pick that apart rather than start from the beginning. So just notice that about the comfort or discomfort in facilitating that. So that's one of the actions from today, right? So we're going to move on to last week. We talked a bit about your position in the teams, and one of the things that we said we would do. So don't worry if you haven't done it; nothing bad's going to happen. But one of the things we said we were going to do was you were going to have a bit of a think about your position in the team. So I'm just going to take you thinking back in case it's gone away, and it was around this stuff. So it was around we can position ourselves in some interesting ways in teams, and it can almost work against us and work against team cohesion. So we talked about the role where you're kind of it all, you're in the middle of it, all the communications going through you, all the directions going through you. That's an unhealthy position to be in, and one that I think we've been really encouraged to take, particularly if you're in a coordination role or a management role. It's kind of almost been the default. So there was that position. There was the position, the position of sitting, so you might be part of the team, but you are really aware that your role is to support this team to communicate with each other and to hold each other to account and to have some of those difficult conversations. But your role is constantly looking at how do I facilitate the whole. And then we talked a bit about, which seems to be much more in favor at the minute, around some kind of self-managing or self-steering teams. So actually you don't have a position in the team, you are called on as and when you're needed. So then the ability for this team to be functional is really important. So what I remember about that is that you were going to have a bit of a think about that for yourselves, and if you could get some feedback from somebody in a team about where they saw you. So I'm not going to test you on it, but is anybody willing to share whether they did do some thinking, whether they did get some feedback, but where it's taken your thinking about your position? Okay, Emma?
I mentioned to Matt and Nate before that I was reflecting on, I haven't actually asked the team, but I was reflecting on my own, line management. And I think I'm part of the team, so I'm in with them. Although we're heading towards we're doing a trial at the moment to do self-manage, so I'm working out how I step back from that. But I feel in my role at the moment that I am part of the team, and my role is just a little bit different to theirs. So, and that's how I like to see it, because I feel like I am part of their team, and that I can answer questions if they need it, or if I don't know, I'll find the answer. That's kind of where I fit.
Right. Okay. But that's feeling a comfortable position to be in. It
is quite comfortable,
right.
Until there's conflict.
Okay.
I'm really uncomfortable. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And just I don't want to push you on it, but just so I'm imagining that you are in this position. Where did I carry on that? I'm imagining that you are in this position. So you are kind of part of the team, but your role is to try and help these function as a team, as opposed to this one, that one.
Yes.
Is that right? That's where you see yourself.
Yeah, that's where I see myself.
Okay. And then when there's conflict, and I don't know about this, but there's a potential, so I'm just putting it out there. When there's conflict, a team's level of maturity can really determine on whether it jumps back to that.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
And your role.
Yeah, I had that experience a couple of weeks ago where I had to step into this role to really, I was getting quite a conflict with a particular support worker. He was not liking me telling him what to do. In this particular situation, he struggled with it.
Right. Okay.
But then I had to step into that role to say, well, this is my job, and this is, I had to clear what his role was and what my role was.
Right. Okay.
Really uncomfortable, to be honest.
Okay. Right. That's helpful, because that helps me get a sense of where you might be in that. Okay. Anybody else? Christy? Have you gone the volume?
Awesome, I'm here. Sorry, I was just struggling to find my mute button. So I've touched base with the team that I've identified, but we haven't gone completely there yet. But I was thinking about my role and where I'd like to be. So I'm thinking about the coordination team in the north. And at the moment, I sit within the team, supporting them, but I am also sort of like outside of that, because I've been supporting them to be a self-led team, making decisions within the coordination team for their staff. So that allows me to sort of continue to step away and only be called upon when they need me to be. So that's right. The future, but I'm sort of like a little bit in a part of the team and a little bit out of the team.
Right.
But I want to sort of, or I want to keep on building the team so they don't need me as much, so I can do the other work that I've been asked to do.
Right. Okay, that's helpful. Okay. Anybody got a different take than Emma or Christy? There's Kat.
Yeah. I have a team of around 11, and around half of them are really strong personalities and very headstrong. There's loads of conflict, and it's almost like there's always conflict. So I really struggle, I guess, when I challenge these personalities, and it doesn't have to be very much. They don't take that directive because they're so headstrong, and they think they have the answers already, so they don't. Yeah, I'm struggling to work out how I manage them. I'm definitely the purple dot in the middle.
Sorry, that's how you feel, with the dot in the middle.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's helpful. Okay. So we'll keep going, right? So the point of getting you to think about where you are in a team at any given point is because it has such a big impact on team cohesion. So if you're in the middle, it's really easy for a team not to be cohesive, because why do you need to be? Does that make sense? Why do I need to get on with my colleagues if actually the aim of the game here is I just need to talk to Kat and Kat sorts it out? I don't need to worry about sorting it out. It's Kat that does it. Does that make sense? So that role that you take has such a big impact on team cohesion that I really want you to be aware of that throughout all of this work, because you are as important to the dynamics of that team as the team members are. So at any given point, thinking about, where am I at here? Am I in it? Am I out of it? Am I on the side? Is this action, so for example, the conflict, is this action that I'm about to take going to support team cohesion or work against it? That's probably the kind of critical question that you need to be asking, okay? So the other area that I'd asked you to think about was around leadership, right? So if you have a leadership role, which I think most people in this room do have, or in this program, if you have a leadership role, it's even more critical that you are kind of questioning your role, really, questioning your position, questioning where you are in position to this team. And I just want to show you a couple of slides that I hope get you thinking a bit about your position. So one of the things that I have learned over the years, I used to teach leadership theory for Lancaster University when I was back in the UK. And it was so interesting that people would come onto this. It was a 2-year program and it was focused at human services. People would come onto this program, I think, believing that by the end of the 2-year program, it was called Leadership for Change, that they would leave as a big cheese and become the next CEO or director of social services or whatever. And actually the program was focused on leadership, not on management. And a lot of that was much more about who you are, what you stand for, and how you choose to lead, right? And one of the things that always seemed to really get on people's nerves or upset people was when we talked about the difference between leadership and management. Now, what I'm about to just run through is, they're not my words. They are largely based on Warren Bennis and John Cotter. And I can put these references in Slack because they have a lot to say. So they are the kind of typical leadership gurus. They've got a lot to say about leadership, right? But I just want, there's a kind of, I'm a very visual person. So there's some visuals that really help me to keep a check on how I behave around teams. So Warren Bennis argues, as does John Cotter, that there is a difference between leadership and management, right? So this is one way of being able to put it. So leadership is doing the right thing. Management is doing things right, which, many times when I've taught this, people seem to get quite offended, right? If they are in a management role and they're quite proud of being in a management role, but suspend your hatred for a moment and just bear with me, because it is needed. So management is needed, but we're trying to just be really clear as a group about the difference between the two, right? So leadership is doing the right thing. Management is doing things right, okay? And Cotter helps us see it in a slightly different way, but it certainly speaks to me when I think about some of the roles I've had. So Cotter talks about leadership is much more around setting direction. So the mental image that comes to me is somebody standing on a path, pointing to where we want to go, and turning around and seeing if there are people who are choosing to follow you, right? So leadership, by its very definition, requires people to choose to follow you. You can't make people follow you, right? So leadership, you are pointing to where we're going, you're encouraging people to come with you, but it's their choice whether they follow you or not. So that's what I think he's getting at. You're establishing the direction. You are communicating in a way that galvanizes people, that draws people to you, that draws people to the vision or to the pathway where you want to go. And it's enough that it is motivating and inspiring that energizes people to want to join that path, right? So that's, if I had a mental image, it would be me on a path, pointing to where we want to go, looking back and hoping that some people are choosing to come with me, right? Management, so the mental image I have for management is, you know, that pathway. I'm on the pathway, but I'm behind everybody and I'm pushing them towards the goal. Does that make sense? So I'm behind, and almost my experience of management a lot of the time is you are pushing people to go that way and kind of herding them, if that makes sense. So they're not just kind of sticking on the path, they're running off, and you're trying to bring them back on and pushing them towards the goal, right? So that's the mental image, the difference for me. So what Carter talks about is management has become very much like a copy. So he argues that the reason that organizations have such a thing as management is that largely it's for command and control. So we want a level of consistency. So we put these people in positions to get people to do things the same, arguably, right? So to get people to do a task or a function or a role the same. So that's what he talks about. And it has much more of a focus on organizing, on getting people to do things, on control, on command, on monitoring, on detail. So you can see the planning and budgeting. So this is very crude. So, and we haven't got loads of time to go through it, but I just want you to really try to think about, so I'm not saying you have to accept it, but think about the difference between the two. So leadership and management, they're two different things, right? These are just some other words. I won't run through these all, but again, these have come from Cotter. So this is, some other ways of thinking about it. Management tends to have this kind of copying aspect to it. So, we put people in different parts of the organization or zones of the organization and expect them to keep order, for want of a better word. Like keep order, make sure the wheels keep turning, make sure things run. Leaders tend to not be great managers. So they tend to be people who often are pushing against some of the boundaries, are pushing against some of the zones or the command or the control. They tend to be people who, because they're so focused on that goal, and that's what we want to achieve, they understand that order is not going to necessarily get them there. Does that make sense? So if I think about some of the best leaders I've met, they're family members. So they are family members of people that we support who keep saying, this is where we're going. And, they try to inspire you. They try to get you to visualize what life could be like for their son or daughter. But they're kind of unrelenting around this is where we're going. And when organizations say, well, no, we do it like this. I've seen some incredible leaders that keep going back to, don't necessarily get offensive, but they keep going back to, I understand why you're saying that, but the way we're going, it's this way. So that kind of, I meet people who, I've worked with many people who are in organizations who are being asked to do a management job, who really are trying to lead, and they're just in real conflict. So they're saying, but this is where I want to go, and I can see that there's an energy and appetite for it, but the organization is saying to them, well, don't you worry about that, just do this bit, that's your job. So I see people who are in real tension, either because they're in the wrong organization, they've got the wrong fit, that they're being squashed over this way, when actually their style is much more around leadership. Okay. Carter goes a bit further, and it is really interesting when you look at the not-for-profit sector, that if any of us set up our own organization, the temptation to mirror what we've learned in places like local government is really strong. So I've worked with loads of peer support networks who've started as kind of sitting around a kitchen table, and we've all, they've all got a common goal. They know where they want to go. They know what it is they're trying to lead towards. And then before you know it, they end up setting up a board, a secretary, a CEO, people who are the doers. It's like we get so quickly into an organizational structure that it's quite difficult to find organizations that don't do that. And this is, I think, what Cutter's talking about when he says that the emphasis on management's been so huge in our cultures that it's almost discouraged employees from leading or learning to lead. So I was talking to a team leader yesterday whose job is to support teams of support workers. And she was talking about what is success in this organization. And, you know, I mean, I think she's pretty hurt by the organization. So I think she was probably being fairly blunt. But she was echoing this. She was saying, they don't want me to lead. They don't want me to be me. You know, they don't want me to try and find a different way to do something. They want me to do it in the way that they think is the right way to do it, even though that's working against the support workers or working against the people and families. So that kind of ability to encourage people to lead and not manage, I think is a real challenge for us, right? And if you're sitting there thinking, well, I am a manager, so what does that mean for me? Like I say, this is not about one is better than the other. Leadership has definitely become more sexy. I'd say in the last 10 years, you know, it's kind of like it's cool to be a leader. It's not cool to be a manager. And I don't buy that, because there are definitely times where I think we need some management. We need some control. And I've been in situations where teams have been around an individual and it's gone wild, you know, and the person's unsafe. And that's because because there is no agreed control. No, not necessarily you have to implant a manager, but management as a function is not a bad thing. You know, I think it is needed, and there are definitely times when I can see the absence of it. But if you're in a position where potentially you have the opportunity to manage and lead, I think it's really worth you thinking about, what am I doing right now? Am I managing? Am I leading? Are people choosing to follow me? Or am I pushing them up this hill, right? So it matters. And probably the critical thing, I think, is you can see people who are just a really bad fit. So people who've been put into a management role, it's not their preferred style, it's much more leadership. And yeah, you see this tension. So I don't know if that's happening for any of you, but I just wanted to put that out there before we get into the servant leadership conversation. So I'm just going to take that off. Okay, so the question then is, if we get into smaller groups, some people did go away and have a look at servant leadership. Some posted, so Chris, Grace, Carla, you posted some information about servant leadership. So it'll be running around your head. And I suppose part of the reason why I felt like I needed to kind of do a preamble about management leadership, I want you to see the difference, particularly in relation to teams, because you can manage the hell out of a team and it won't become cohesive. It might function, so you might be able to get it to do tasks. But if you want it to really be cohesive, autonomous, then I think the role you need to take is much more of a leadership role. And if I was really pushing it, I'd say much more of a servant leadership role. So we're going to get into groups. We're going to have, I don't know, less than 10 minutes, probably about 7 minutes, to just check in with each other. What has this all raised for you? You know, what has it raised for you when you think about leadership and management? What's it raised for you when you went away and thought a bit more about servant leadership? Is that okay?
How many groups do you want, Kate?
3.
Cool.
Actually, we'll have 5 minutes. I think Susan's doing something. I can't do it. So it's that magic. You all just slowly disappear.
Bye.
You're back? How was that?
Yeah, we got very chatty in that one.
Got very chatty, did you? Okay, anybody, we're not going to go around to everybody, just because I want to make sure we get the chance to do an analysis. But any big headlines? Is that me?
Yeah.
Oh. Any headlines?
Any headlines? I'm on. One of the things we thought was that it's very aligned and in keeping with working in the human services sector. There's a sense of, it stems from, I think, a sense of social justice, and people who work in that way have a strong sense of social justice. So I think that was in keeping with the philosophy of people who work in this sector often. But I did just say that when I had read this, I recognised a leader not in this sector who was entirely committed to the organisation and supporting the people within the organisation. Now, he was a pain in the arse, actually, if truth be told. So it's not just nicey nice, I'm a social worker type. I actually see there was something about him. He was truly committed to what the organisation was about, not just self-serving. And he galvanised people. But he really wanted to serve the people as well. But it wasn't in a wishy-washy way. So that was where we landed.
Okay, so one of the tasks for the next 2 weeks is exactly that, Grace. So to look at somebody that you think, or some people that you think represent the difference. I don't want you to go up to people and say, oh, by the way, you're a shite leader. You know, I think you're more of a manager. Don't do that. But I want you just to notice. So the people that you work with, just have it in your consciousness about, yeah, they definitely seem to, you know, are they inviting people to follow them? Have they got followers? Or does it feel like they're pushing people up the path, right? So I just want it to be in your consciousness because I think it has such a big impact on teams. Okay, so I'm just going to move us on. So one of the things that is a reality, right? All of the teams that you'll be working with are all in different spaces. So it's brilliant if you have a new team that have just formed and you start to work with them intentionally. That's a brilliant, brilliant position. That has happened to me, I think, once. I've worked predominantly with teams who've been in existence for a while, are not working brilliantly together, and then I've been asked to work with them, right? So it's great if you've got them right at the beginning, but that's not my experience. But I just want to show you this really quickly. It's probably the most common tool that is around about teams. You know, I'm sure you'll have all come across it. And it's the Foreman, Storman, Norman, Performan. So it's Tuckman's model. So has everybody come across that before? Some people are nodding, some people not so much. Okay, so this will be in the reading information after the session. So I'll post the document back in and there's some more information about this. But what Tuckman argues, and it's interesting because if you think about a new team, so a team that's just come together, what Tuckman argues is all teams and groups go through some version of this, right? So all teams have a stage where they come together and they are very polite. They're kind of getting to know each other. So, you know, they'll make each other's cups of teas. And even when they don't really agree with each other, they'll say, oh, no problem. You know, they're just sussing each other out. They're trying to find their feet. That is a phase. And yeah, if you think about a team that you've joined, you know, you should be able to recognize those phases, right? So there is the foreman stage, just finding your feet. Then what happens is people they start to know each other and they start to figure out, I don't see the world like you do, and I definitely don't see the world like you do. So, but me and you have got much more of alignment. So what happens is, Tuckman calls it the storming stage. So teams are starting to figure out who each other is, starting to disagree with each other. So remember, conflict is a good thing. So yeah, this is the stage where conflict, you'll see it happen. So, you know, a support team, and it is really interesting because this model has been around for years and years and years. And a support team that's newly formed, comes around a person, starts to work, and it's all going great, and then they all start to fall out. This is the stage that they're going through. They're figuring out who each other is and how they're going to work together. People can find that difficult. That's where they can pull on the come and stand in the middle and sort all of us out. And that's where your resistance to do that has to be quite strong. You know, I'm going to help you figure out each other. So there's a storming stage. You'll see in that graph on the right-hand corner that storming is when the performance of a team is least effective. So you can imagine a team starts, they are at a point of, they're not hugely effective because they still don't know each other. They start to storm and their effectiveness goes down. And then Tuckman argues people then start to come back up in terms of their performance because they start to norm. So he talks about things they find a way to become normal together. So they find a way to resolve their differences. They find a way to figure out how to communicate with each other, how to work with each other. They're able to see each other's strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, find a way to become normal together. I think this is really interesting if you apply it to your relationship. Not that we'll do any of that analysis because that's probably inappropriate, but yeah, there's definitely something goes on really similar in a relationship. Then you get to a point where the team is at its peak. So it's now absolutely, they've found a way to work together. They've got a way of being able to say, we've got a challenge. We know that you're good at that. Or they've figured out each other's strengths and weaknesses so they can put the right people on the job, if you like. They're at their top of their peak performance. And when he added this about 10 years ago, he argued that teams who come together to do a project, then if they disband, so they've finished, there is a period of grief that team members go through. So if you think about a really good team you've worked in and then you've left, it's quite hard to join a new team without a sense of grief if it's been a good team. So that's what he talks about. The thing that I found really interesting in this, I think teams go up and down this cycle, particularly if a member leaves. So a team can kind of be performing and they don't just stay there and be brilliant. Things happen that bring the team back down again. So usually it's new team members starting, or some kind of a crisis can put a team back into storming. You didn't do this right, and I've always known that about you. So that's one model. I find it loosely interesting. It's kind of when I first meet a team, if they've just started, I know that I can expect this. I don't find it the best analytical tool, to be honest, right? But then that's probably because I find my own better.
Kate, just to let you know, you've got 1 minute.
Okay, so task. We are going to get into pairs, and I want one person to talk about a team that you are working with, and I want the other person to do some kind of analysis, right? So what's helpful when you're talking about your team, think about the history of the team, the highlights, the lowlights that have happened, the villains. So there's always strong characters. Every team has a story. So, what's gone on for this team? Have there been heroes, roles that they've been able to take up, challenges? Have there been significant events in these teams, right? So one of you is going to talk about a team that you know. And then the other one, I want you to do some kind of analysis. And by this, I just mean listen to them and think, it sounds a bit like this to me, right? I want you to think about the 5 areas of dysfunctional teams that we talked about last time. So are you hearing stuff that could tell us that there's an issue about trust? Are you hearing anything that could tell you that there's an issue about conflict or being able to have debates and discussions? Are you hearing anything that's telling you about commitment? Is this team really committed to working together? Is this team really committed to the job in hand? Are you hearing anything about accountability? Who's holding these members accountable? And are you hearing anything that gives you some sense, so I find it easier to word it this way, that gives you some sense, actually this team doesn't really know what it's supposed to be doing. It doesn't know what the end game is. Okay? So you're going to listen to the team, and you're going to do some analysis. So listen to it, and then all I want you to do is at the end of that conversation to say, so if it's based on my assessment, I reckon there may be some issues of trust and there may be some issues of commitment here. Does that make sense? So you're just having a stab at it, because that's what you are going to do with your team. You're going to have a stab. There is a formal assessment we can use, but I think I'd prefer to get your head into what am I hearing about this team and what's it telling me. Is that okay?
So there's going to be 3 teams of 2 and 1 team of 3. So just make sure that you're managing your time, especially in the team of 3. We're going to give you 10 minutes. So the teams of 2 can have a quite luxurious 5 minutes each way, but the team of 3 will have to manage themselves. I'd suggest probably having somebody as a timekeeper so that everybody gets a good 3 minutes of.
And the third person, you do your own analysis as well. See if you can if you land somewhere different than the other person.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Okay, I'll put the 5 areas in the chat room, so if you can see the 5 categories: trust, conflict, commitment, accountability. I'll do that now, so you've got it.
Here you go. See you in 10 minutes.
So I'm not gonna check in with you, right? Which could be. Oh, it sounds terrible. Is that any better? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to check in with you. I'm just going to keep us going because I want to make sure that I give you the right information for the next 2 weeks, right? So I just want to show you that you're doing some analysis based on 5 themes. So like I say, there is a formal tool, which is a Lencioni tool. It's a team assessment tool that I'll put in the Slack channel. It's useful, but I think if you understand the areas of dysfunction, you can do your own assessment. But for now, I prefer that you try to figure this out yourself rather than using the tool, but I'll put it in, right? So I just want to show you this. There is a survey that I know, Christy, you'd asked for it last week. I've put it in the Slack channel in session 2 materials, so it's there. So is the document that gives all of the more detailed reading. So the survey's there. So I use this survey. I made it up, so it's not scientific. It's based on the Lencioni areas, and these are some of the questions that I asked. And if you think about when you were just listening to a team, what you're doing is trying to learn a bit about, am I hearing any of these things? Am I hearing some things about trust? Am I hearing anything about conflict? Like, I don't know where Kat, the group that you were in, one of the things when people say to me, there's loads of conflict, like there's a kind of good thing about that, but the places I'd be looking is commitment and accountability. So if there's loads of conflict, they're happy to shout at each other, or they're happy to, where is the level of commitment and accountability in that group? So all we're doing is pointing our attention to, actually, maybe that's where I need to spend some more time. That's where I need to focus, right? So the survey is there. You can use that if you want to, or a simpler way of doing it is to get the team to tell you their story. So you get the team together, create a social contract, and then the first thing you're doing is trying to learn about how this team sees itself. So you can use the survey, or you can just ask the team to tell you a story. I've done all kinds of things. The reason that picture of Disney is up there, I've asked a team before to tell me about their team as if they were a Disney film. So, once upon a time, we all started and there was this horrible manager who came and was terrible. And, so they've always got a story. So they're always willing to, there's always one there. But the reason you're trying to do this is for you to do some analysis, right? And I'll put this in the Slack channel so you can have a look. I used the survey with a team, and this is what I got back. Right? So I got back this kind of information. I collated it, but it told me a bit about how this team worked at its best. So they were really good at facing a crisis. They were really good if there was a big challenge. Some of the things that I heard in their answers to the survey was that they weren't brilliant regulators. So when they were all very emotionally passionate people, but what that meant was the level of regulation in the team was really poor. So one person would go off like a bottle of pop. The other one would be in tears. The other one wouldn't speak to each other for weeks if they were upset. But when they got on, they were best mates, right? So that tells me something about their level of regulation. They're not regulated very well. I learned some stuff about what you see going on in the team. So this just came from that survey, that set of questions. What's it telling me about when they're working well? What's it telling me about when they're not working well? And people told me this kind of stuff. And it told me some stuff about, they were up for the challenge. They were up for working together. And the area that I noted for this team particularly was I need to work on their emotional regulation. That was where I went with this team. There was also something about their accountability, this team. So they were, like I say, when they were best of mates, they were best of mates. When they fell out, they called on the manager and made the manager get in the middle instead of how do we hold each other to account, right? So what I'd like you to do this next 2 weeks is, if you're working with a team, I'd like you to develop a social contract with them and notice what that's like. Where do they go with that? What do you notice about it? Remember to hold your nerve, so it might feel a bit uncomfortable. It will absolutely be worth it later on down the line. If things start going pear-shaped, you'll come back to the social contract. It'll be your kind of anchor, right, and the teams. And then I'd like you to do some form of analysis on the team. So either do the survey or get the team to tell you their story. So tell me a bit about where this team's been. What are the team's strengths? What are the team's weaknesses? What have you noticed about when things get tough? What have you noticed about things? Now, because I don't know about your individual circumstances, right? If you're not able to do this with a team, then at the least, you know, it's not our job to test whether you do or you don't. At the very least, I want you to do some analysis on that team. But this will be the world according to you, which is often dangerous, right? But I'm okay with that. If that's the best that you can do, that's the best you can do, you know. But if you can work with the team to do the analysis, that would be better. I think you get richer information and a better perspective. But worst case scenario, you think about the team and you do the analysis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just because I'm obsessed with this, right? I'm just going to check that you, over the next 2 weeks, I'll go in looking for somebody that you think's a really good leader, somebody that you think's a really good manager. What do you notice? What do you notice about followers or people who are being pushed? And if you can, what does that tell you about you? So that kind of leader, manager, and then a social contract with a team and a team analysis. Is that okay? And like I say, in the Slack channel is the information, is the survey. I'll put the Lencioni survey in, the team survey as well, in case you want to use it. Yeah, I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, and if there's any questions at all at any time, just pop it into the Slack, and Kate and I are obviously monitoring that regularly. So please don't feel like if you get stuck that you can't ask. And you might even decide to ask each other as well. So thanks everybody again for today. Let's do a quick checkout round. And the checkout question is, what's something you're curious about leaving today's session? I'm curious. I'm just curious about what you're going to find in your team assessments. Who's next? Carla.
I'm sort of the same. Like, I'm curious around the team analysis and how that's going to go, but also around like looking at the certain leadership and management within our organisation or within our teams. So.
Cool, thanks. Nathan.
Yeah, much the same. See how the team feel that they're going along as well, and see what the self-analysis is for each people within the team and how they feel everything's going.
Great. Who's next? Matt.
I'm curious about developing the social contract. I guess my initial thoughts around that are that it's going to be pretty straightforward, but if I've learned anything from developing those workshops after listening to Kate, there's always some left field things that you've got to think about when developing those. So looking forward to that.
Great, thanks. Who's next? Chris.
I'm curious about having a go at forming some sort of analysis with the team that I work with.
Great. Kat, I saw your hand, I think.
Yeah, much the same as everyone else. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. It'll be an interesting one for me. I think the team will agree, but it's going to be a shit fight.
Lovely. Emma.
I'm looking forward to self-reflecting on how I manage this as well. Agree with. I'm looking forward to this. I'll be interested to see what the survey says, but like I said, I avoid conflict, so I'm looking forward to challenging myself and having an element of comfort when this process happens, and not trying to avoid it.
Cool. Thanks. Shanti.
Well, I'm curious about all the responses that I'm going to get. I'm going to share all of this with them. And obviously, we've all got an idea as to what the responses might be, but I think I'm going to be surprised. So I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. Christy or Grace? Grace, go.
Oh, hi. I'm curious about what I'll see when I'm really looking for people demonstrating servant leadership.
Nice. Christy.
I'm curious about I'm going to have a conversation with Matt and Carla, because they're my teammates here at Inclusionary Way, about how we could implement this within our own team. So Matt, Carla and I are a team, because I had a different team in mind, but I think this could actually be something that we look at for this particular team.
Nice, thanks. Kate?
I'm curious about what it's going to take for me to manage the time better. This time I even had a run sheet with times on it, and I still haven't managed to do it. So I'm curious about what that's going to take. Yes.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday and couple of weeks, and see you on the Slacks, and can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.